Okay, good morning everyone. As mentioned, my name is Jonathan van der Walt. I am a visual artist and a visual arts lecturer from Nelson Mandela University, specifically with an interest in traditional and digital sculpture and the intersection between those two spaces. And I head the digital 3D hub at Nelson Mandela Department of Visual Arts, and I'm going to be splitting this sort of reflection into three parts. I'm going to speak about this digital lab, its current state, how we implement it into teaching and learning, and then how I utilize that space within my own research, in practical-based research. So this is a photo of the hub as it stands. I mean, as the lab as it stands. It was generously funded by the Milan Trust with our director of school, Peter Binsbergen. So at this stage, I call it the digital lab, but at this stage it's a 3D print lab, and we have hopes of developing that further as the years go. So it's still fairly new, just a couple of years into operation. Aha, it works. Okay, so this is just the tech. I'm not going to go through exactly the details of the printers we have, but we've got quite a large range of filament printers in application. This video actually shows at one point projects going from first year through to a master's study that we're utilizing the machines. And you'll see the filament printers at this stage are very entry level. We've got about 8 approachable entry level models that are from a range of about 3,000 Rand to 5,000 Rand for obviously the purpose of our students and them being easily able to understand the tech, get used to the process of printing. But there's a great need to develop that into a full digital lab so that the processes of working towards the full workflow of creating a digital lab is important. So this year we've acquired more funding to include a 3D scanner into the process. We've utilized it a lot, but it's normally through collaborations with other entities. And then hopefully from 2026, we can have a full computer lab where the students can actually generate their own models a lot easier, learn the softwares involved, and also the preparations needed to print. At this stage, because of the limitations, we've worked with an engineering unit called ENSA at the engineering department, and what they provide is access to their tech as demo, which then, for their sake, they work under a subsidy to showcase their technology. So we provide the students for them to actually showcase their technology, get through the numbers of all these new eyes and hands exposed to their tech, and then from there they benefit from that collaboration. So this was a first-year project. Is this mic going on and off? Okay. This is a first-year project that we did a few years back, where the students, you can see in the foreground, actually had a clay model made. They had to make a clay animal face for a mask. Then ENSA 3D scanned all that. We prepared those digital files for the students to print little key rings at the end of it. As it is an engineering department, their tech is very high tech. I think that scanner was about 2 million Rand or so. So it's a bit excessive for the application we used it, but it was subsidized in the process. So the way we're working towards it is to bring in a lot more affordable entry-level scanners for the students to get used to, because it's difficult to pass that 2 million Rand machine to a student. Another project that we did with the first years is to try and develop a way in which they can think 2D, 3D, 2D, 3D. So this was a project where they created, out of cardboard, they cut out a scene. They had to find a scene in Gqeberha where we were that they wanted to showcase through a diorama of four panels. And in that, they'd have a foreground, a middle ground, a background. They would generate a scene, cut it out of cardboard. And then through the process of photography, we could heighten the contrast levels. So this is all the students working in a lab that's on a different campus to where the 3D lab is. They can generate a positive model out of putting the contrast on white, and then from that, through Photoshop, they can extrude a 3D form, as you can see there. So then from that, they can export that 3D form into a file, email it through to the lab. The lab can print that project. So it was, these are certain applications we've had to work or adapt to based on technology we didn't have that was quite vital in the process. So we didn't have the lab at the time to actually have them generate models from scratch or in the digital realm. So through the application of cardboard and photography, we were able to get a digital model. So there was a very interesting project that provided other sort of interesting gains from that task that we utilized in this project. And then this just showed the full process of slicing. So the slicing software is what allows that 3D model to be interpreted into the mechanics of the 3D printer. And it turns the vertices or the surface of the digital model into code called G-code that are basically points on the 3D printer in coordinates. And it'll say, push molten plastic this far out at this point, move a millimeter there, do it again. And it's just a whole bunch of layers of this code that then look very organic in its procedure. And what we did in this case, because the lab is so distant from the actual campus that they are working in, we do it through demonstration. So we'd get the students in to this lab and they'd be exposed to all these processes. They would see how the model is sliced, they would see why it's sliced, they'll see errors, they'll see issues as to what went wrong, but obviously the lab's vision is to be in a space where the students are doing that, learning from their own mistakes, and then getting very hands-on with the printers. And this, as you'll see in the next project, wrong way. Still the wrong way. There. Okay, so this was a student, one of my honors students a few years back, who had a very successful application of utilizing the digital in his art-making process. So Tsatang Pomotse, as you can see here, is the title of his research, Art as a Reflection of Individual and Collective Agency, exploring the potential that digital and unconventional modes of art-making can contribute to social justice discourse within the context of post-1994 South Africa. So what he did is he came to us with an interest of self-taught 3D modeling through an access of a laptop he had gained at some point that managed to hold that software. But it provided a very interesting dynamic conversation between free, accessible, and digital. The software he used was free to download. So Blender is a powerful free to download software. So accessibility is there. He had a laptop from a previous grant, and he had trained himself through YouTube tutorials. And he came to us with quite a grasp of that process. But then at the same time, he didn't have funds for any further material. So his work was conveyed through the visuals of unconventional modes and digital. The cardboard was accessible, paper mache, newspapers, and he formed that through 3D prints. And at the same time, 3D prints we have, as I said, is a very entry-level model, 3,000 Rand, and then the prints are, I would say it probably cost about 20 Rands worth of material to print that back of the bakkie. So it's a very low-cost method of making as well, once you have a printer. So what he did, he also utilized, going the wrong way every time. He also utilized free asset stores So there's a lot of libraries out there that allow you to download models for free that you can obviously not resell, but you can use in narrative, you can use in research, you can use in exploration. So he brought in elements like that, the narrative here of mob justice and an issue he came across in his environment. He used various objects that he could find for free. He modeled faces. He created bodies out of paper mache that had heads that were 3D printed and painted. And he really wove these two worlds together quite seamlessly. And obviously this is a narrative of access to water. He sort of contrasted that with the voting line iconography as well, with the silhouettes. So it became a very powerful study that wove these two worlds together that I felt was very successful in the world of digital humanities. The mother of this scene, that face, was digitally modeled and 3D printed, along with many other items in that. This specific scene continued that layering of a diorama, but in the back it was made to fit an iMac screen. So that back screen is actually a video that he did, a time-lapse video of a sunrise and a sunset in his area where he lived, which became very successful applications of this idea of unconventional free access material. So I spoke. Am I speaking? Hello? Okay. So I spoke about ENSA as the engineering unit. So in my postgrad, I reached out to them, which started this connection and this development that has actually benefited the hub and the lab with the students. So at that time, obviously, they're an engineering department. So at first, I thought I was coming with nothing to the table, to a degree, asking for very strange requests as a visual artist to scan. Whereas it was surprising how much in that collaboration they got out of it and how much they enjoyed and sort of heightened and brought many of their hands to the fore to assist in certain projects, because for them, most of their scanning are high precision scans of gears or very mundane engineering-based stuff. So to come with these weird things, and you'll see some of the other things I've asked them to do, it made me realize the benefits of a two-way collaboration, and everyone can take out of these moments different things. What you can see on the right is a piece of a new body of work that I launched last year. Here's more of it. So this is a scan that ENSA did of me, which I used as a basis for some of these 3D printed artworks. I also utilized 3D scans and then digital modeling from scratch as well. The body of work was I created at William Humphrey's Art Gallery for an art residency last year that turned into a solo show, or it was expected to conclude with a solo exhibition. So again, 3D modeling and 3D tech became hugely beneficial for me at that stage, because I had to work within a studio outside of my own for a month, but I shipped one of my small entry-level printers with me, and what that allowed is a set of hands, another set of assistants for me. I could model in the evenings, come to the studio, set a 10-hour print, and then while it's making some of my sculptures, I'm making other sculptures or other paintings. So in that way, the application became very, very successful. The thematic is an exploration on identity and belonging as a white African. So it's a critical reflection on the braai as a symbol, with its associations to National Heritage Day, or a blanketed association. So it critically looked at the symbol and its woven ritualistic act in my life, but also as a critical look at what it means to have a white skin in Africa and what it means to not have any ties anywhere else. So I looked at monuments, I looked at different aspects of white identity. This one reflected on a monument in Gqeberha, the Campanile, which is a celebration of the 1820 settlers, a centenary monument of the centenary of that arrival. So I played a little tongue-in-cheek on the braai, as well as the digital. So the digital for this body of work became a metaphor or a narrative of my contemporary self in conversation with heritage and tradition, so the traditional modes of making. And that's why I weaved resin, bronze casting with the digital and 3D printing. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, can we open up for discussion, questions? That's some interesting work. I was quite fascinated with the 2 million printer. Prof and course, you can sponsor us to 2 million printer. Okay, any questions? This is a very different dynamic from what we've seen yesterday, so I think this takes it a bit more further in terms of, can we get more microphones here, colleagues? Okay, we've got.
Yeah. Good morning, colleagues. Sia from UNISA. Just a quick question on the impact of digitality and how it disrupts the entire art market, right? So, for instance, traditionally you've had instances where visual art, particularly your prints, there's ridiculously expensive work that you see all over the world. And so with the advent of the concept of digitality and visual art being available on screens and so forth, in any way, do you think that that notion has disrupted the market itself? And if it has, in which ways do you think it has? Has it made it more available to your normal man and woman on the ground, or it's still the way that it has operated that is the market? Thanks.
Hello? Okay. Thanks, Prof. I think as in most of the disciplines or sort of industries, I think it definitely has disrupted, especially the rapid growth of it. But I think it's also allowed for, as I think McMahon also referenced, that idea of authenticity and tracking and legitimizing the digital. So it's in the same way that the tech has excelled or gotten ahead of us so fast, we've had to up our game in how to track it. So I think there will always be probably moments in that journey that haven't been the best practice or have reflected exorbitant prices and unrealistic reflections of art, and then maybe also in the same way a lot of issues of plagiarism or issues of sort of reproductions of other people's art. But I think, yeah, I think it's the way in which digital is now operating. For me, it's a way of application that exceeds a lot of other ways that traditional media is limited. So in the case of sculpture specifically, as a sculptor, if I do the traditional ways of making sculpture, it requires a lot of process, it requires a lot of machinery, but at the same time, it's a messy process. You can pretty much work on one piece at a time. It causes a lot of mess around your studio. Whereas in a digital application, I can have 10 in-process sculptures in my laptop bag, basically, on the cloud, that I can access at any point with multiple different devices. And then when I'm ready for it to become real, I can print it or CNC it. So I think in that way, I utilize that's, well, I wouldn't say convenience, but that benefit of digital application.
Richard, 2.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. My name is Michael. I'm from UNISA. What I can see, what you present today, and I believe your university have the Humanize project. Right, last year I was talking about that. Now, what I can see, this is a comment to your research that you're currently doing with the students. You are actually are humanizing your pedagogy, that's number one. But how will you address, in humanizing your pedagogical side, the ethical considerations when students are getting the free will, the creativity, the critical spatial thinking, development, and problem solving? How will you ensure, as the lecturer or your students, inculcate the ethical use of AI in what they are currently doing? Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I think that's a very difficult question, a very tricky one that we're all trying to adapt to. For me personally, in the practical application, the monitoring of the use of AI for us is very obvious at this stage because of the lacks or the obvious issues presented in generative AI in visual art. It's very susceptible. It's a lot more advanced within text application at the moment, so it's hard to find in text unless you have even the sort of scraping software, well, I don't know if that's the term, but the software that analyzes the percentage of AI use is also struggling to keep up with other adaptations of paraphrasing and other softwares. But in the generative space, even in 3D modeling, in 3D application in AI, it's very low-based at the moment, and you can quickly see when it is. So its use in an ethical manner in a lot of our processes when students do use it is as it's in a sort of prototyping phase or an ideation phase for us. It's a way to generate ideas. It's a mood board. It's an application to visualize ideas in color, in form, that you can then go, okay, wait, that's an approach I could do, and then apply that into your own making. So that is where AI is used currently in our creative practice.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It's very interesting. I am Annemie Baer from the Department of Art and Music at UDISA. First, I want to just comment. I attended a presentation a year or two ago, and I can't remember the person's name, but he's a lecturer at WITS, and he teaches photography. And what he did with his students in his teaching, because cameras are so expensive, he started printing, 3D printing cameras, so that they can use it in their, to learn basic photography. So that was very interesting. The question comment that I have, though, is a bit more philosophical, somewhat. But in terms of digital humanities and the advent of just digitality overall, especially during COVID times, have created a kind of fear, not a fear, but a concern for me around the relationship of the human with physicality and materiality, and the separation that it has somehow caused. You know, the idea of we're having now meetings online. It's a completely disembodied experience, and everything is happening on a screen. But with this kind of creative practice that you bring here, and with also the conversations that we had yesterday about the metaverse and how the digital technologies are now becoming more part of our everyday lives and how we move and how we interact with the physical world around us, it gives me a little bit more hope. Because what you're doing is you're using digital technologies but producing something physical, something tactile. But somehow the texture of it is changing, right? And the feeling of it is changing. So sort of what is your take on the impact of the digital world and our relationship with the material world around us?
Thank you, Annemie. It's a lovely question. I think for me, what is interesting is going into tertiary or learning the traditional ways of making. I always had an interest in digital, but for a long time separated it, feeling it was a a way of cheating in a way. It felt so removed and so different from the act of making that I couldn't see a way of incorporating it. And it was actually through COVID that my interest in the digital was heightened, and I explored that more. And for me, what I have found in both sort of desktop research as well as applying it in my own creative practice, I have found there's a lot of debates on the I think Richard Sennett calls it the separation of the head and hand. There's this cut between what you think it should be in a digital space, so we're talking with architectural software or 3D modeling software, and then the physical application of it there's a removal of that designer. And I think what the process I've started to utilize with the students and with my own research is that we're joining that again. So it's not completely removed. There's an understanding, and then there's also benefits in that understanding, because as you work across those streams, you know what the form is going to be. You know how it's going to feel. You know how it's going to weigh. You can relate. It has a relational entity to your process. So in that way, while you're making digitally, it feels real. And it's a weird cycle that you get into when you, if you think of power tools in industry or in art making, you're doing what your hand cannot do in the first place. You can't cut that tree. You can't even draw a line on paper with ink by yourself. You know, it's all assisted with mediums and technologies from the past. So all of this is just an extension of that, I think, in my way. That mouse and the keyboard and the way it interacts with that thing I'm seeing feels like I'm pushing it now because of that understanding of that physicality. I hope that answered the question. Yeah.